The bustling streets of New York City were alive with energy as people rushed past high-end restaurants and luxury cars. Amid the chaos, a young boy named Elijah Carter weaved through the crowd, his tattered clothes and dirt-smudged face a stark contrast to the world of wealth surrounding him. His stomach growled in protest, he hadn't eaten in 2 days. As he passed an upscale restaurant, his eyes locked onto an elegantly dressed man sitting at a table by the window. William Lancaster, a billionaire tycoon, was about to take a bite of an exquisite gourmet dish, a meal that likely cost more than Elijah had ever held in his life. And then, it happened. "Don't eat that." Elijah's voice sliced through the chatter of the restaurant like a knife. The entire establishment fell silent. The clinking of silverware ceased. All eyes turned toward the disheveled boy standing at the threshold, his outstretched hand trembling with urgency. William Lancaster froze, his fork hovering inches from his mouth. His sharp, calculating eyes narrowed at the child. Who was this boy? Why was he yelling? The restaurant's security guard took a step forward, ready to remove the child, but something in Elijah's desperate eyes made William hesitate. "Why shouldn't I eat this?" William's voice was calm but firm. Elijah swallowed hard. How could he explain what he had just seen? Elijah's heart pounded as every pair of eyes in the restaurant burned into him. He could feel the tension in the air, the disbelief, the annoyance. Yet, he had no choice. He had to speak. "Because it's poisoned." Elijah blurted out, his voice cracking. A wave of gasps rippled through the restaurant. William Lancaster's fork clattered onto the plate, and the color drained from his face. A man like him, powerful, untouchable, was suddenly staring at a boy who had just accused someone of attempting to take his life. The maitre d', a well-dressed man with years of experience in handling difficult situations, chuckled nervously. "This is absurd. Someone, remove the boy at once." But William raised his hand, stopping them. His sharp eyes locked onto Elijah, searching for deception. "How do you know this?" William asked, his voice a low, measured growl. Elijah hesitated. If he told the truth, he wasn't sure if anyone would believe him. If he lied, he would never forgive himself. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "I saw the chef. I saw him put something in your food." The restaurant staff erupted in protests. The chef, a middle-aged man with a proud mustache, stormed forward, his face red with rage. "This is ridiculous. That boy is lying." But Elijah wasn't backing down. "I saw you," Elijah said, his voice shaking but firm. "You looked around, then sprinkled something from a tiny vial." "I swear." William glanced at his plate, then at the chef. His instincts, honed from years of business dealings, told him something wasn't right. "Get the food tested," he ordered. The restaurant manager hesitated, then nodded. A waiter carefully picked up the plate and disappeared into the kitchen. A tense silence filled the room. Minutes later, the waiter returned, his face pale. He whispered something to the manager, who then whispered to William. William's expression darkened. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "He's telling the truth." A stunned silence followed. Then chaos erupted. The restaurant, once filled with quiet murmurs and the clinking of fine silverware, erupted into chaos. Guests gasped, some even pushing their plates away as if their own meals had suddenly turned into poison. The chef, who had moments ago been indignant, turned ghostly pale. "This is a mistake," he stammered, shaking his head violently. "I would never." "Then how do you explain this?" William Lancaster's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He held up his plate, now confirmed to contain traces of a deadly substance. "If this boy hadn't spoken up, I'd be dead by now." The chef's hands trembled as security guards moved in. One of them grabbed his arm. He jerked away violently, knocking over a glass of wine in the process. "I swear, I didn't do this. Someone must have set me up." But William wasn't listening anymore. His sharp gaze flickered back to Elijah, the homeless boy who had just saved his life. He knelt down to the boy's level, ignoring the whispers around them. "Tell me exactly what you saw, kid." Elijah hesitated. This was where things got dangerous. He could feel it in the way the air suddenly felt heavier, the way eyes darted around nervously. He wasn't just exposing a poison plate, he was uncovering something bigger. I was outside, looking for food in the trash, Elijah admitted, his voice softer now. Then I saw the chef step aside while someone in a suit whispered something to him. A few minutes later, I saw him put something in your food. He looked around first, but he didn't see me. William's jaw tightened. Someone in a suit? Did you see his face? Elijah nodded. He was tall, dark hair, had a scar right here. He gestured to his cheek. And he was wearing a watch, really fancy. At that moment, something changed in William's expression. His usually unreadable eyes darkened. I know exactly who that is. William Lancaster was no fool. He was one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the country, and over the years, he had made his fair share of enemies. But if what Elijah said was true, this wasn't just a business rival trying to take him down, it was an assassination attempt. And the man Elijah had just described? That was Victor Calloway. A former associate. A man William once trusted, only to discover that Calloway had been running illegal deals behind his back. William had cut ties with him years ago, but it seemed Calloway wasn't done with him. William stood, adjusting his suit. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number. Find Calloway. Now. The restaurant's security team moved swiftly, escorting the chef out in handcuffs as the guests whispered among themselves. But William wasn't done with Elijah. Come with me, kid. Elijah blinked, taken aback. What? You just saved my life, William said simply. That means I owe you. But you've also just made yourself a target. Elijah swallowed hard. He hadn't thought about that. If this Victor Calloway guy was dangerous enough to try to kill a billionaire, what would he do to a street kid who got in the way? Elijah hesitated. He had spent most of his life surviving on his own. Could he really trust this man? But then he thought about the alternative, going back to the streets, alone, with a target on his back. Okay, he finally said. I'll go with you. William nodded. Good choice. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was only the beginning. William Lancaster's black limousine cut through the city streets like a silent predator. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Elijah sat stiffly on the leather seat, his fingers still gripping the ragged cloth bag he carried everywhere. Across from him, William scrolled through his phone, his expression unreadable. Where are we going? Elijah finally asked. Somewhere safe, William replied. But something in his tone told Elijah that safety was a relative term. The car pulled up in front of a towering glass building, Lancaster Tower, the heart of William's empire. Security guards flanked the entrance, and Elijah swallowed hard. He had never been anywhere this fancy before. As they stepped inside, William led him straight to a private elevator. It shot up to the 45th floor, opening into a sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sit, William instructed. Elijah hesitated but obeyed. William poured himself a drink, then turned to Elijah. You've seen something you weren't supposed to see. That makes you a liability, to Calloway, at least. Elijah shifted in his seat. So what happens now? William smirked. Now. We make Calloway regret ever trying to kill me. William's team moved fast. Within an hour, they had pulled up footage from the restaurant, tracking Calloway's movements. Sure enough, he had been there that night, slipping into the back entrance, speaking with the chef. He's getting sloppy, William muttered. Desperation makes people careless. He turned to Elijah. You want to help me take him down? Elijah blinked. Me? What can I do? William leaned forward. Calloway thinks you're just some street kid. He won't expect you to be working with me. That gives us an advantage. Elijah hesitated. He had spent his whole life avoiding danger, not walking straight into it. But something in William's eyes told him this wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. And for once in his life, Elijah wanted to be part of something bigger. "I'm in," he said. William smiled. "Good. Let's get to work." That night, Elijah found himself in a situation he never imagined, sitting in the back of another sleek car, dressed in clean clothes William had given him, listening to an earpiece as Lancaster's voice guided him. "Stick to the plan," William's voice was calm but firm. "You're just delivering a message." "That's it." Elijah nodded, stepping out of the car. The meeting spot was an abandoned warehouse, classic bad guy territory. Inside, Victor Calloway stood with his men. He was just as Elijah had described, tall, scarred, and exuding danger. Well, Calloway sneered. "The street rat returns. I should have made sure you disappeared the first time." Elijah swallowed hard but stood his ground. "William Lancaster has a message for you," he said, voice steadier than he expected. "He knows what you did. And he's coming for you." Calloway's smirk faded. "That so?" He snapped his fingers. Two men stepped forward. Elijah's heart pounded. "Get him." Elijah's heart pounded as Calloway's men lunged toward him. He spun on his heel, dodging the first attacker's grip. But before he could run, the second man grabbed his arm. "Let me go!" Elijah shouted, struggling. Calloway chuckled. "You've got guts, kid. Too bad Lancaster won't be able to save you." Just then, the warehouse doors burst open. A dozen men in suits stormed in. William Lancaster's personal security team. At the forefront was William himself, his icy gaze locked onto Calloway. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," William said smoothly, stepping forward. Calloway's face twisted in anger. "Lancaster." "Save it," William cut him off. "We have everything. The footage, the transactions, and witness testimony, including this brave young man right here." Elijah gasped as armed police officers followed William's team in, weapons drawn. "Victor Calloway, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy, and multiple counts of fraud," an officer announced, stepping forward. Calloway's men backed away, knowing it was over. The crime lord's face turned red with rage as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You think this is over, Lancaster? You're making a mistake." William smirked. "No, Calloway. The mistake was yours." As Calloway was dragged away, Elijah exhaled in relief. His entire body trembled from the adrenaline. William placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid. You helped put a dangerous man away." Elijah looked up, searching William's face. "So, what happens to me now?" William studied him for a moment. "That depends. You've got potential, Elijah. You're smart, brave, and quick on your feet. You shouldn't be on the streets." Elijah's breath hitched. He had spent his entire life feeling invisible, like no one truly saw him. But now, someone did. "You mean, you'd help me?" William nodded. "Not just help. I want to give you a future. But it's up to you." Tears stung Elijah's eyes. He thought about the life he had, cold nights, empty stomachs, the fear of tomorrow. Then he thought about what could be. Finally, he smiled. "I'm in." William grinned. "Welcome to the family, kid." Months later, Elijah sat in a classroom, his first real school. He had new clothes, a warm bed, and a mentor who believed in him. He still carried the ragged cloth bag from his old life, but now it was a reminder, not of pain, but of how far he had come. As he walked out of school that day, he saw William's car waiting for him. "Ready for dinner?" William asked with a smirk. Elijah grinned. "As long as you're not trying to poison me." William laughed, shaking his head. Elijah climbed in, looking out the window as the city lights flickered past. For the first time in his life, the future didn't seem so scary. For the first time, he had hope. This story is more than just a tale of crime and redemption, it's about second chances. Elijah's journey reminds us that no matter how tough life gets, there are people willing to help, but we must be brave enough to accept that help. If you ever feel lost, remember, you are not alone. There is always hope, and there is always a way forward. Folded hands, thank you for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Bell subscribe for more inspiring stories.